Ever since its debut back in 4th July 2024, Zenless Zero has been the fastest growing piece of media that I have ever seen, and what is there to be surprised of? Excluding the fact it's made by gadget giant Hoyoverse, it still managed to stand out in a very highly competitive field. With its unique artistic directions, choosing a more retro-punk urban city style rather than a action sci-fi, sprinkled with a bit of fantasy element that most gacha games seems to favor. Fluid animations with a variety of characters with tons of personality, and its satisfying dopamine-producing combat, not to mention a fascinating world to boot, which I'm highly invested in. With all these elements combined, it's no wonder it became the massive success that it is, with tons of video dissecting its quality, meta, character build, character showcase, lore discussions, and whatever this is.
真没见过黑社会的，干嘛给我明明话？什么叫黑手？
Yes, I know, God is dead and we kill him. Moving on. So, despite all that, there's still one thing I feel like a lot of people are not talking about. The bosses. Now, I gotta ask you, what is a boss fight? No, specifically, what is a boss fight in a gacha game? Bosses in gacha game are usually just two beings playing who can kill who the fastest. They're usually just damage sponges. A wall staying in front of the player, meant to be knocked down and move on. They're either insanely hard or they die in 2 seconds. Not saying gacha game bosses can be interesting, but most of the time it's just that way. They don't teach you anything and you gain nothing from them. So that brings me to the bosses of Zenless Zero. And why yes, that logic also applies to them, but in order to bring out the big numbers, you need to utilize the mechanic of the game, such as when to dodge, when to use your EX attack, when to counter, and when to switch. The game, while fast-paced, also has a sense of timing. You can't simply blitz through it. The game forces you to slow down and consider your next move. You might be powerful, but you're also easily just as fragile. So I figured I would make this video as a critical analysis of each boss to see what makes them work, what do they try to accomplish, what is their role in the main story, and how does that translate into gameplay. Disclaimer, I will only be discussing the main story bosses and not event bosses such as Nivene, because at this point there's not a whole lot of information on her that I could use to analyze. And second of all, elite enemies and mini-boss will not be counted. Because 1, there is way too many of them for the sake of video, and 2, they do not have much significant impact on the overall story. So, without any further ado, let's dive right into it. The first time we saw the Dead End Butcher, the first thing it does is try to surprise attack Billy from a distance, and when that doesn't work, it immediately directly confronts them. And I think a lot of people just don't realize just how important this first introduction scene is. Yeah, of course, the Dead End Butcher is big and ferocious, but the fact it's even smart enough to do that shows just how different it is from all the other enemies we've seen up until this point. Before that, we only fought a few punching bags, allowing us to learn the basic of control, and then this guy drops in and we're put against our first real enemy. The atmosphere of the fight is amazing. We're fighting him at night, in the middle of the rain, while the sound of thunder mixed with the sound of his roar. It's an absolutely cinematic experience, and there's no way around it. In order to beat him, you have to use the basics. The first phase is simple. It attacks you with these broad sweeping attacks while moving at a much faster pace, but not completely overwhelming new player. The animation of each attack is also crystal clear, as it does these really aggressive poses that makes it easy to predict. It actually feels like me trying to swat a fly in my room. While there is a dangerous set of moves here, yes, the game always gives you a bit of room to dodge. It is an artfully well done early game boss. It serves as a good challenge for new player, while having enough depth for a veteran to master. With that said, its second phase does fall off a bit. Straight up the bat, it gains 2 more arms and a laser. While the laser itself is not bad, the problem is consistent repositioning, forcing the player to go on one side of the map, and then he jumps and forcing you to go on the other side of the map. His moveset also changed and feel more animalistic now, as he uses his new arm to do these long-reaching attacks, claw swipes, and barrages of slam attack, and a launch attack that you can't parry, such as the first phase. One interesting design choice here is all the dead and butchered animations are attacks. This creates an effect where it either watches you or attacks you. It makes you feel like it does nothing but attack. This raises the bar of aggression significantly for future enemies. But that also creates an issue. Because he has so many attacks, it is a bit hard to read his movements. It doesn't feel rewarding dodging him, as he barely gives you any time to breathe. This can lead to an issue where sometimes he can over-attack you, knocking you down, and right as you get back up, he does it again, further escalating the intensity. On top of that, his damage balancing is a bit off. Sometimes he does a ton of damage, or next to nothing. But despite that, I'll still give him an A grade. Though his second phase is left to be desired, his first phase is a good example on how to execute a tutorial boss. Not to mention the music, which is anxiety incarnate itself. It feels like a ticking time bomb, waiting to be exploded, which suits the dead and butcher perfectly, as it always feels like it's too angry to die. Now, I have to be honest, Corruption Complex is my least favorite boss out of all of them. In fact, not only him, I find the entire boss design of Chapter 2 to be the weakest. They decided that instead of fast-paced precision attack, they would replace it with these broad, heavy, weighty attacks that, while slow, punishes the player heavily if they were to make a mistake. While that itself is not a bad concept, they fumble the bag completely when it comes to the bosses. Instead of giving them some form of punishing the player that makes sense, each time the bosses attack, it stun locks them in place while dealing massive amount of damage. And that's annoying. Some of the bosses' animation fails to indicate when the player should be dodging. Some are obvious, some are not. And all the bosses is riddled with these gotcha attacks. They're just cheap and dull. Not to mention some of these attacks drags out. Like some of these attacks should feel like 1 second, just keep going on and on. With all of these combined, it makes fighting the bosses feel like a chore. It makes you feel unfair as you're forced to watch your character contort in pain while you're unable to do anything but helplessly watch just because the game didn't properly communicate it with you. And when you apply the same concept to the Corruption Complex, who not only suffer from these issues, but also has one of the most demanding moveset in the game. Out of all the bosses, only Corruption Complex forces you to dodge each and every one of its attacks in the exact same way, perfectly as the dev intended to avoid it. Because of its size, if you try to dodge it any other way, you often get caught in its huge attack. But despite of its size, this is the same boss that can somehow do a 360 tail swipe in the air. So much for heavy, weighty attack. It also has one of the worst attack in the game, that being the missile. If you play ZZZ, you know that there are some attacks that you can't block, but characters can naturally deflect it, such as bullets and projectiles. But not every character can do it. Well, unfortunately, if you do not have one of these characters, you'll be bombarded by these unblockable, undodgeable missiles. This attack shouldn't belong in a boss fight. While it doesn't do much damage, in a fight where you can't heal, every single bit of health matters. Why do they do this? I don't know, as it limits the variety of character that you can use down to a select few. Not to mention these cheap gotcha leg attacks. Like the dev just doesn't have any other way to damage the player than just to make the boss slightly move his leg up and down to send the players flying. Oh god, phase 2 shouldn't even be called phase at all. He shouldn't even have a phase 2. They don't even try to do anything original with him. All they did was give a boss another giant laser beam that this time not only tracks you, but also creates these little AoE attacks. They explode after a short while, in which that you have no way of knowing when they do. They don't even try to do anything to change his moveset. Besides making him do the exact same fucking move every time. Like, gee, that's so interesting and innovative. Got me scratching my noggins here. So yeah, Complex Corruption is a poorly designed boss that doesn't give the player any form of expression and heavily relies on cheap gimmicks for attack. Not only that, the bosses has a pointless second phase that don't even teach the player anything at all. Screw this guy. At least the theme song's fire. After climbing the Twin Ballet Tower, our heroes are faced with the Twin Marionettes, the ghosts of two sister dancers who tragically die in the Twin Ballet Hollow. There's more to these two if you play around and explore the game, but just know that they got one of the strongest and saddest flow in the game. Even without the main cast, these two can still stand alone as characters. Due to the amount of backstory we got for these two, the Twin Marionettes is a contender for the most atmospheric fight in the game. Their music is ethereal, with its choir of classical music from pianos to violin, showing their past life and experience as these grandiose star dancers, mixed with this glitchy hip-hop that comes out of nowhere. It feels like an infection, showing their corrupted state now. It's a clash between past and present, life and hollow. It tells you a story of these two that you are facing now are nothing but hollow shell of what they once were. Fighting the dancer is a dance. If you don't follow their rules, they tear you apart. Their moveset is also one that fits them really well. Each and every motion feel all at once unexpected and animalistic, yet so fluid and majestic without a moment of hesitation or effort. Every now and then they do these long speedy attacks with these lingering hitbox means that positioning is key here. The dancers is also one of the first spots that utilize timing, training the player at how adding delays and animations can reward or punish them. Fighting the dancer feels off. Each attack comes a little later than you expect, which leads to this unnatural feeling that transcends the confine of the animation into the gameplay. Utilizing this delay, it forces the player to figure out the timing of the attack. It sets the boss apart while also maintaining a level of fairness. Because once you learn how to face them, the dancer becomes far less intimidating. Funnily enough, there was once a time where the Twin Marionettes was widely hated, simply for two reasons: their invincibility phase and the reviving mechanic. Because the Twin Marionettes does not have a phase 2, the intensity and duration of the fight could be significantly reduced. Adding these phases keeps the player engagement and develops their sense of timing. And also the boss doesn't need a phase 2. It's perfect as it already is, now your boss needs a second phase. And I don't find the reviving mechanic annoying. My first time around, I hated it, but after a while, it's not as bad as you think. It makes the player pay attention to both of them and manage their health. But not only that, it also ties very nicely into the lore. The two sisters died tragically without anyone but themselves, so when one of the sisters is defeated, the other one abandoned any sense of hostility and ignored every damage inflicted on her just to try and save the other one, because they would rather die with each other than live without the other. That's great. There is only one word to describe corrupted Overlord Pompeii, and that is badass. Chapter 4 is all about metal, from its Mac setting and character aesthetic to its music, and this boss fight embodied that perfectly. The story set Pompeii up as the king, the final obstacle of the Sons of Caledon, but he got tragically backstabbed and left to rot. What we see in the story is probably him as his weakest state, so it makes us wonder what he's like when he's at his prime. Having him turn into a monster not only fulfilled that expectation, but it surpassed it. They didn't just give him a weapon, they turned him into a fucking Dante from Devil May Cry. To describe the fight, it is chaos. The first phase is him driving his bike around the arena, using the camera lock-on system to disorient the player. Yet, it never feels overwhelming or obnoxious. Combined with his laser grid and his whip, it gives the fight a bit of a dynamic. It actually feels like he's toying with us and not taking us seriously, but his second phase he no longer does that, as his second phase is no joke. He turned his bike into a hammer while also wielding a sword. It's like he's asking you for a duel to see who gets to be king. You are literally dethroning the king in this fight. In the second phase, the most dangerous range is far too mid-range, as he does these jump and drop attack on you, dealing massive amount of damage. The game forces you to get close to him, fight him one-on-one heads up. And he hits like a truck, by the way. Each time he swings his hammer, it does a massive amount of damage. Not to mention the exploding part as well. But Corrupted Overlord Pompey does have an issue. Once he does his move, if you dodge it once, he is stuck into that animation. He cannot escape. You can just simply wait him out and such. The game does limit it by giving him a massive AoE burst and having him 2 phases of invincibility, but it's still overall a good fight. A tier. And with that, we have reached the end. All 4 bosses of Zenless Zone Zero. I decided to make this video due to the fact I find Zenless Zone Zero bosses to be quite similar to, now hear me out, Dark Souls bosses. Yes, I know, that's quite stretching it a bit, but I find the aspect of mixing story elements with gameplay and pushing the players to their absolute limit between the 2 games is what makes them so special. Because sometimes this game boils my blood with the way it handles some enemies. With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked the video, please hit like and subscribe so your boy can finally hit 1,000 here. I wish you all a beautiful day.